Welcome. I'm
Thank
Susan McConnell, your LinkedIn for the Reserved Champion. Thanks for joining me. I host this conversation every Tuesday at 12 with different business owners on different topics to light up my network with actionable ways to improve your business so you can be fabulous today. And today I have a very special guest, Andrew Kitchner. Andrew is the CEO of New Wave Solution. Can't even talk today. New Wave Solutions, NWS. Andrew has surveyed more than 500,000 employees. Wow, that's a big number. Since the start of the pandemic, helping people and leaders utilize employee feedback and improve retention, culture, and employee experience. So, welcome, Andrew. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, I'm happy to be here, Susan. Thanks for the invite. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. This is going to be really fun. And what I will do is throw your email in while we're talking.
Right.
And then if there's any other contact info that anybody needs at the end, but chime in with questions or conversations, anybody that's watching us live. Andrew's a wealth of knowledge. And if I go from my experience, the last time I actually worked for a big company, I don't think they even had surveys back then. And it was not even, if anything, they weren't even very good. So tell me a little bit about how it has progressed, and we'll go on to some of the good questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So things have changed pretty quickly. So surveys, when they first got started, this was maybe 40, 50 years ago when they first kind of entered the scene. And since then, they've gone through a couple different evolutions. So at first, they were more geared towards measuring job satisfaction or career fit.
Right.
And then from there, it went to more employee engagement. And now we're a part of a movement that's focused more on what we'll get into later on here, but a metric called organizational commitment. And then big picture, employee surveys have kind of gone from some obligatory HR function. Some companies felt like, oh, this is something I have to do. It's not something I want to do.
Oh,
And now it's kind of transferred to be seen more as an opportunity rather than an obligation, both for the employer and for the employee.
That's awesome. And so you talk a lot, and I read a lot about, some of the posts and some of your information on your website. You talk about organizational commitment. That was a long word for me. What exactly is that?
Yeah, it's a good question. You can just call it commitment, less syllables.
All right, thanks.
But organizational commitment or commitment, it's a survey metric similar to employee engagement or job satisfaction. These are all survey metrics or psychological constructs that can be measured using survey questions. And what organizational commitment is, it's a measure of employees' commitment to their company's goals and values.
That's awesome. And I don't ever, like I said, remember any questions like that in any survey that I ever completed for a company. That's awesome. They're at least trying to engage and get some information that will be helpful, which is great.
Yeah, and the role and importance of value alignment is becoming increasingly important. So it's kind of at the forefront of HR leaders' priorities is to make sure that their company's values are clear, that they're implemented and lived up to, and that employees are aligned with them.
Okay. So what are the outcomes or even the benefits of increasing the organizational commitment?
Yeah, that's kind of the crux of it, right? So if you're going to choose one survey metric, you want to choose a metric which, as you improve it, the outcomes or the benefits are going to be more than they would be with a different survey metric. So for commitment, what we've seen for just our clients at the very least, on average, we've improved their commitment by around 20, 21%. And I've listed here a few of the outcomes that they've experienced. So 23% fewer employees experiencing burnout, which is more important now than arguably ever.
Yes.
A 17% decrease in voluntary turnover. With the tight labor market and the great resignation, as it's been coined, that's increasingly important. We've seen a 15% drop in absenteeism, and then a 21% increase in psychological safety. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term, but all it is essentially how comfortable and confident am I going to my superior saying that I think that they're doing something wrong. So it's a term coined by Amy Edmondson, a professor from Harvard, and she found it as the most important or best predictor of avoidable hospital deaths is when hospitals have high psychological safety. And
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah.
and the benefits carry over to other industries as well.
That's very cool. I mean, and now you're measuring things that actually happen to the employees so that they can be helped. And that's pretty cool. So, how does organizational commitment compare to employee engagement?
Absolutely. That's the important question. First off, it's important just to frame the situation that we have. And the situation is that for the last 30 years, companies have been measuring employee engagement. It's been seen as the status quo for, like I said, over 3 decades. Actually, since the year that the World Wide Web was developed is the same year that employee engagement kind of burst onto the scene. The difference is both in terms of reliability and predictiveness. So organizational commitment is both more reliable and more predictive in terms of those desired outcomes. And one of the best voices on this distinction is an HR thought leader. He's worked for Deloitte. He now has his own company. His name is Josh Bersin. And if I could just read a quote really quickly by him.
Go right ahead.
Perfect. So he states that the word engagement often limits our thinking. It assumes that our job is to reach out and engage people rather than to build an organization that is exciting, fulfilling, meaningful, and fun. Plus, we aren't just looking to get people engaged. We want them to be married, that is fully committed. Mm-hmm. So it's really about a collective sense or a shared set of company goals and values, which employees are committed to and feel that they're more important than any one individual. Mm-hmm. So that's really the major distinction between engagement and commitment is that definition, but also the gap in predictiveness and in reliability as a measure.
Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, I definitely want more committed people than engaged. I understand that.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
how does definitely. Sorry about that. How does your survey simplify action planning for HR leaders?
It's a good question. And the importance of action planning it can't be overstated. If we're taking the time to get employee feedback, we need to have a plan in place to actually utilize that feedback to create beneficial changes. If that process isn't in place and there's a long delay before action planning actually happens, the desire for employees to participate in the next survey is going to go down. So there needs to be a process in place. As far as what we do is we have multiple what we call drivers of commitment. So aspects of the business that impact employees' commitment. So that's pay and benefits, company culture, direct manager, company communications, and a few others. So we have all of these drivers, which are for different organizations are going to have different impacts on their commitment level. So the first thing we do is we need to determine which of these variables is going to most directly impact their commitment levels. And we do that using regressions. I don't know if you want me to get too much into the stats, but I'll just kind of keep it surface level. Okay. What regressions allow us to do is we're able to say, okay, company culture is your biggest driver of commitment. If you improve company culture satisfaction by, say, 10%, here's how you can expect commitment scores to change. And that allows us to prioritize these different drivers. Mm-hmm. And then once we've determined those top couple drivers, we use employee feedback or free response or open-ended questions to actually isolate actionable improvement opportunities specific to each one of those top drivers. Okay. Does that make sense, kind of big picture wise?
Somewhat, Andrew, okay. Somewhat.
Okay.
Good thing I'm not in HR, but it's awesome what you're doing. It's incredible that like we're starting to at least care about the people that work for us and actually want to take care of them. And I think it's great. So how is your approach better for analyzing and utilizing the employee feedback that you get with your?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the biggest questions within the industry is how can we effectively gather so much feedback and then utilize it?
Mhm.
Our approach is definitely different from anybody else on the market.
Oh,
So
cool.
everybody else on the market is doing some type of automated analyses. So they're doing some analyses to either say the phrasing of free responses is more negative, more positive, or the keywords appear a certain number of times. Kind of these automated analyses that, in my experience, have been good information but not actionable insights. So what we do is we actually have every single free response read by one of our researchers. So we have a large staff of researchers,
Oh, wow. Okay.
and our philosophy is that if employees take the time to write feedback, we take the time to read it. And it sounds common sense. It sounds like something that it's hard to disagree with, and that's why we do it.
Yeah, that's very cool. I mean, if you have an actual person reading it as opposed to a computer that's trying to beat something of a person, and it's hard. Yeah.
Yeah, and
So,
we don't want to overstate how good computers are at it. You know,
right.
where if they could do it as well as a human, then I'm on board with it. But we're not there yet, unfortunately.
Gotcha. I gotcha. So, how do you help clients overcome low survey participation?
Yeah, that's a common problem, and really it boils down to one of two things usually. One is we see that the employees do not trust that their anonymity is going to be protected, and because there's low trust in terms of protecting their anonymity, they don't want to participate. The second is that they don't believe that their input is going to be taken into account and implemented as a change for the organization. So there's a mindset of why participate. The only other variable that comes into play is sometimes these surveys are just too long. They're
Oh,
60 questions long,
right.
and people don't have that amount of time, or at least that amount of mental energy to methodically fill those out. And
Mhm.
so what we do is when we go in, we want to understand which one of those three or which combination of those three are causing the low participation within the organization. And then we address those before the survey is sent out.
Oh, that's awesome. So you take some time up front to make sure that it is going to have some good engagement. That's great. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so you've been doing this for a while. How many surveys have you administered?
Close to 500,000. Over now. I would say it's closer to 600,000 than 500. And that doesn't include previous research that I'd done before. So really our team stepped up. We got started not too far away from when COVID first hit. And really since then, the amount of surveying has almost doubled, just nationwide, whether it be COVID related or remote work related,
Right.
return to work sentiment. There is much more demand for surveys. And when
Mhm.
you're not able to have that in person communication, the only way to stay in touch in a methodical manner is to have some form of a survey feedback opportunity for employees.
Yeah. So do you find that, I mean, I think surveys, I think very large company, but I think that a lot of companies are starting to use surveys. Like what is like a typical, good client for you, or are all types of companies doing surveys now?
All pretty much all types of companies are. So we've surveyed companies from 10 to 10,000 employees.
Okay.
So it's a pretty large
Yeah.
range. I would say that most of our clients tend to be between 100 and 2,500, but that's not for any particular reason in terms of other companies not doing surveys.
Mhm.
Essentially, what it comes down to is, do you value your employees' feedback? Is question one. If the answer to that is yes, a feedback survey makes sense. Question number 2 we ask is, do you want your employees to be more committed to your company's goals and values? If they say yes to that, then we're moving forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's funny. I mean, like this is probably an add-in for you, but my boyfriend works for a large company. He's fairly new to it. Well, it's not that large, maybe like a couple hundred. And they had a company survey, and they like went through the results somewhere around Christmas, and to make sure everybody participated, they put a drawing on it, which was kind of funny.
It's definitely something that I've seen too. I've been tempted by in organizations where you want to add that extra incentive. The reason why we tend to avoid that is because if people are only motivated by the chance to win a drawing, then how substantive, how accurate, how honest is their feedback to be? You want the incentive structure not to be for completing a survey, but for providing substantive feedback.
Yeah.
That's why what we do to kind of increase participation is we tell employees changes are going to be made after the survey. If you want your voice to be heard, we want to take that into account. And so if you want to be a part of determining what changes are going to be made, now's your opportunity.
That's good. I like that. I think that's a better way, but I imagine some people will try everything, just to get people to engage, right?
Absolutely. As long as you don't overlook any underlying issues like those 3 that we went through.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree. So obviously turnover nowadays, especially with the, fact that a lot of people are having trouble hiring, what is the cost of turnover now? Is it more now?
It is more. It is more. And that's because the underlying costs of turnover are wide ranging. So it goes from the opportunity cost of I lost this person who had connections, who had certain experience, information, but it extends all the way to now I have to hire somebody else, which means recruiting, which means going through the interview process, then onboarding, then training. All of these variables, for the most part, have gotten more expensive. And the national average is about 30 to 40% of an employee's annual salary is the cost of turnover. So if somebody's making $100,000 a year, the cost of that person leaving the organization is between $30,000 and $40,000, or 30 to 40%. And what we see is that as the job complexity increases and the salary increases, so too does the percentage of the annual salary that it costs for turnover. So if there is an IT executive making $350,000 a year, it's going to cost more than 30 to 40% of their annual salary. So the rate only goes up from there.
Well, there's a reason to keep people, right, Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's going to be the future. Is the determinant of success is going to be how capable are you at recruiting, utilizing, and retaining top talent. That's what it's going to come down to.
Interesting that you say that, because I used to do a little bit of hiring. Not that I'm the best at it, but a lot of the things and the words I used to read was it hire slow and fire fast? That may change, right?
It's definitely starting to. I mean, people
on both, right?
Yeah. People want to hire fast, but they can't. It's a tight labor market, and the power dynamic has kind of shifted from employers to employees. Employees kind of for the first time feel empowered to be selective in who they work for.
That's crazy. So how are you helping companies through this sort of the great resignation?
Yeah, it really comes down to that commitment. So what we see when companies and employees have high levels of commitment, employees are not only not tempted to go look for alternative offers, but they're not tempted by those alternative offers when they get put in front of them. You can imagine if you're working for, let's say, there we go, that side, Tesla right there, and you really believe in the goal of reducing carbon emissions and accelerating the transition to electric vehicles, and you have that shared commitment to a set of goals and values, you are not going to be tempted when, let's say, not trying to throw another company under the bus, but let's say Toyota comes in and wants to hire you for $10,000 more. Well, a lot of people are going to stick with Tesla because they have that shared commitment to something bigger than themselves. And so when we go in, we're able to uh, uh, essentially be an ear for HR leaders to better listen to their employees. And then by doing that, we're able to increase commitment and therefore improve retention.
Yeah, I actually just, talking with my children as they've gone on interviews and gone for jobs, is they do look at what these companies, have as their missions and their values. And I honestly can say, I don't know if I remember looking at that when I was, interviewing for the companies that I've worked for besides myself.
Things are changing though.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's partially a generational shift, but a lot of it's just like many other transitions and shifts. The pandemic has just accelerated it.
Yeah. Oh, definitely it has. It's, you want to keep the people that you have and keep them happy and keep them safe too.
Absolutely.
That's crazy. So in addition to your commitment feedback survey, you also provide custom solutions
Yep.
based on the needs of the clients. Give us a few examples of those, Andrew.
Absolutely. So some have been return to work sentiment surveys. Some have been COVID safety surveys. Some have been remote work optimization surveys. So, for instance, we have a company where half the employees are hybrid, half of them are remote. The
Mhm.
communication barriers between them, they knew that there were communication barriers. People were operating in silos, but they weren't sure which aspects of communication were the largest barriers between these two groups of hybrid and fully remote employees. And so what we did is we went in there, we asked both groups, and then we followed up with focus groups with each one of these populations to determine, okay, here are the most common issues that each side is running into, and here's what can be done to solve those. And then we essentially ranked those or prioritized them based on prevalence. So if
Okay.
50% of employees thought that uh, one factor was the biggest essentially hindrance for effective communication, that's what we recommended to address first.
Yeah.
But big picture, what we do is we don't want to force an organization to use a certain survey. What we want to do is we want to hear what are their goals, what are their problems, and then tailor a solution to fit those. And we found that just to be more effective, more personal, and maybe not as scalable, but it's more effective.
Oh, I definitely more custom towards a company I think would be much better. Give us an idea of some of the types of companies that you've done some surveys for, Andrew. That'd be interesting to hear.
Yeah, so we've surveyed, let's see, companies across 45 different industries now.
Wow.
So pretty wide ranging. I would say the biggest or most common industries have been in the AEC sector, so architecture, engineering, and construction. They've been hospitals. They've been technology companies. They've been venture capital or private equity. We just finished up with TCV, Technology Crossover Ventures. So they're a local venture capital company here. And now we're starting to work with more school districts than ever. So not only higher education, but K through 12. So we're now working with
Oh,
one of the top 10 biggest K through 12 districts in California. And we're working with more school districts, like I said, now than ever before. So it's really wide ranging. Like we talked about, anybody who benefits from employee feedback or who wants employees to be more committed, that's who we help.
wow, that's great. 45 different industries. So you have lots of ideas and have learned a lot from a lot of these different companies. That's great.
And it's allowed us to get industry averages too, which is really important for benchmarking. So we can go in, we can help a lot of different companies and say, here's how you compare it to your competitors. And so if your competitors have employees who are more committed to your goals and values or to their goals and values than you, that's an issue. And that's
That's
something
awesome.
that companies want to know and see how they compare against.
That's a huge benefit right there. That's great.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Andrew, this has been really awesome. We've learned a lot about the fact that surveys are now much more about getting the customers, your employees to be a little bit more committed to you, and that's great. Make sure to join me every Tuesday. Next week, I will have a replay, or I'll have Tucker, our Facebook ad guy, on. He's going to teach us how to actually do a Facebook ad, because I'm a Facebook ad flunky.
Very cool. I'll be there.
Yeah, definitely. It sounded interesting. I already asked him questions. I had 3 things to do before, and I was like, oh no, I'm gonna have to get this done. Because I'm a LinkedIn person, I'm not a Facebook person. So
I'm right there with you. But I appreciate you having me on, Susan. This was fun.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. So thank you everybody for being here today. Andrew, hang on for a sec. We'll chat right after. And everybody have a fabulous day, and we'll see you next week, and we'll pretend we're on Facebook.
All right. Bye, everybody.
All right, ending the broadcast. Bye, everybody.